Fuel lies. That's a headline on the Daily Nation today. And Philip, you can have it up there, because what it is showing is quotes from two people. One, the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Energy and Petroleum, Opiyo Wandayi, on the 7th of April. He released a statement in which he was saying that there was fuel that had come in through One Petroleum Limited, an oil trader, a petroleum trader, had imported this product. This product was substandard. This product was procured outside of the government-to-government procurement deal. And in this particular statement, Opiyo Wandayi goes to say, among many other things, inter alia, One Petroleum Limited, the company that imported the said product and invoiced oil marketing companies, is directed to exit this product out of Kenya as soon as possible. Okay? He went before the National Assembly's Committee on Energy on Monday. And there he said, I was not aware that One Petroleum had been contracted to bring this energy, this fuel, petroleum product into the country.
Right.
Neither was I aware that Oryx Energy had been contracted to bring in their shipment. And that's why when it was brought to my attention, I took it to the president immediately, and the instruction was stop them. And that's why they were stopped, and the officers were therefore arrested and investigations commenced. Why did they resign? I don't know why they resigned. They must have very good reason why they resigned, but they also know how the culpable they were. That's Opiyo Wandayi's statement before the National Assembly. Yesterday, the acting Kenya Pipeline MD, who has basically been a senior manager at the pipeline, was before the Senate. And he said what Kenya Pipeline did was following due process. That there was due process, which was letters, official letters from government entities. One, the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum, which requested KEBS to allow for this fuel to come in,
Right.
despite it not meeting the standards, the highest standards set in Kenya. And two, the Cabinet Secretary for Trade, allowing that consignment and accepting the application for waiver, but under certain conditions. And the acting Kenya Pipeline MD, Mr. Mwendwa, said, we followed those conditions. Now, here's the thing. This is an officer at Kenya Pipeline who's saying we followed the conditions, which obviously then asks you, so Joe Sang, the former MD, and the management knew about this and they were following the conditions given.
Yes.
Which also tells you that even these oil marketing companies, when they were importing, there was some government knowledge about it. But Opiyo Wandayi said in Parliament he was not aware. He was not aware that this fuel was being brought into the country. What we have heard from Khalid today, Hussein Khalid, of Vocal Africa, was calling for the resignation of Opiyo Wandayi. If he does not resign, the president must make him step aside. That is, the president must dismiss him.
Yes.
And I think anybody who talks about accountability, if we are to fix this nation, we've got to fix this nation by levels of accountability.
Yes.
Agreed.
This accountability must come from this level. If you're a cabinet secretary and you go in and say, by the way, these guys, I was not aware that there was any importation. Documents are tabled in Parliament that show that you are copied in communication with this. When the PS was writing to KEBS, he copied the cabinet secretary. When the CS Trade was responding, he responded to the cabinet secretary, Opiyo Wandayi. But Opiyo Wandayi says, Guy, that's when I began to learn about it. I think this one we've got to say no. There has to be proper accountability for this. And for that reason, Opiyo Wandayi ought to step aside from this ministry. It is that clean and that simple. Opiyo Wandayi should step aside from the Ministry of Energy.
Yep.
You can't come and tell us you did not know. So if you did not know, then step aside. You come and lie to us that you don't know. If we actually establish that you're lying to us, you should step aside. If indeed you knew, and this is all a game that you're playing, just step aside. In all, Opiyo Wandayi has bungled this entire thing.
I like that you start Crockett. I like that you started with threading. These were the experts donated to government, from ODM to streamline things, to improve efficiency, And this is the first, perhaps, big crisis, aside from pricing issues and, this and that. This is the first big crisis that Opiyo Wandayi has had to deal with in this energy docket. And to bungle it like this is, I don't know. As Erica said, there's no situation where the answer isn't ebu songa kando.
Whether or not you knew the
Because
answers.
if you didn't know, again, the burden of leadership is you take responsibility. So it's either you involve yourself top down and you figure out what's happening in your ministry, what's happening in your docket, or you find ways to get that information pumped to you. That's essentially what leadership is. So there's no excuse for, I did not know.
Yeah.
And if you didn't know, it still speaks to your leadership. So I completely agree with Eric.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of fixes were the people were scrambling for, because I'm seeing there was also directives from now Opiyo Wandayi to remove this contaminated fuel. What are we calling it? Bad fuel from the market. Substandard fuel, right? And then there was no real idea on how to implement the order. So then again, it speaks to a lot of things. It speaks to, I'm giving orders, but I don't understand the modalities. Because just threading from what we were listening to yesterday, once imeingia kwa pipeline, again, kuitoa, it's already mixed with essentially what we had before.
Yeah.
It's already in the system. It's incredibly difficult. So now the question is, accountability looks like this. Is it us letting the PSs hang, essentially? Is that accountability? Or is it going further up and saying,
literally was just going
Yeah.
to say that. I was going back to the quote today. Disorder is the highest stage of order.
yeah,
A lot of this reeks of something that maybe isn't quite clear, and maybe it's anecdotal, and to say it without necessarily having full-on evidence. But there is the kind of thing of weakening institutions that is played out. Because if you're talking about higher up, maybe I'll go straight to say the head of state. It could be different. Being able to, when it comes to institutions like this, where whatever happens affects the lives of millions, then you have a say and a hand in it. You're able to use that power and influence to say, I don't understand what happened. I know that this is going to be looked into and you're going to be questioned. That has to happen. However, step in leadership. If you're seeing folks who have resigned or been asked to step aside or resign, and as Eric has said, they know, they're experts and they followed the book. How is that not something that you can say, hang on? And again, my bad. I know it's easy to say the Constitution, he can't just say that. But something like this shouldn't fully be left as is when you can smell a rat.
yes.
And I think there's this habit of what looks like weakening of institutions by making certain parties look like they're powerless or not having the full answer to suddenly come out and have a solution. It reeks of disorder and order. But I'll pause there because I'm still looking at a bit of research before I come back after the break to be like, aha,
This is,
this is what it means. But that's the
light
first thing
bulb.
that has come to mind.
I get it.
Yeah.
And threading on your worry, I'm looking at PS Shaban, at former MD, I don't know. Yeah, he's resigned. So former MD Joe Sang. And looking at the dockets they've held, we keep saying we want technocrats. We want people who are committed to their work, who are
Yes.
capable of doing their work. It has to be an enabling environment as well. And on this show, we've had the pleasure of hosting so many people who are incredible at what they do in and out of government. Thinking about it long term, if you know, and it could be speculation on our part, but if you know that you will be left to hang or thrown under the bus at the slightest inconvenience or at whatever issue, it doesn't really encourage you to want to work, in the public sector. It doesn't really say, yeah, government job. I'm excited about that. That sounds fantastic. Unless you have ulterior motives, right?
Yeah.
But if you actually want to serve and you know that mimi sina fallback plan, mimi si mwizi, I'm doing this as part of my career progression and maybe to serve the nation.
Yeah.
If that is you, I guarantee you will not be looking at what's happening right now and saying, wacha nitume CV yangu gava.
Yeah.
Wacha ni lobby nipate hiyo
Literally.
kazi. It's not going to be you.
No.
And then as a result, who comes into public service? It's people who have ulterior motives, who are greedy, who are maybe not technocrats, or even if they are, we're not attracting the best. So again, the problem with your public service just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. This is not to say, I can't say definitively that there was no wrongdoing, but when you see the biggest duty bearer in the link just completely, wash their hands of it and be like, Miss Kujua, yet ulikuwa CC'd, it speaks, that's a red flag. It tells you it's actually the other way around, just from life and seeing how things go.
That's what I'm saying. Anecdotal, you can reflect on it. We'll come back. We are having a conversation around what we've seen on the front page, fuel lies, but more than that is asking and saying, some are asking, some are just saying that the CS should step aside because he's essentially the leader of this docket, and he failed. He failed to see so many red flags, and it's causing what many are saying is just a crisis that didn't need to be there. It's coming up to 7:30. We'll come back and continue to discuss this issue. You can share your feedback with us as well, and we'll read it out loud on air. Just show us. Hakuna judgment hapa.
We are safe space.
We'll get back into the discussion just now, but there's quite a bit of feedback. It says here, there's a lot of people talking about accountability. So Michael Angai says, in Kenya, the resign vocabulary is non-existent, not in any textbook of goons in suits. In other progressive developed democracies, Energy CS would have resigned immediately. Agri Momanyi says, unfortunately, even the president can't sack the CS whom he depends to sing to his tune. Shaman HQ, accountability in leadership isn't erased by I didn't know. It points to either direct involvement or a serious failure of oversight. Jimmy Kwan, I told you, he's either incompetent or complicit. And then finally, Talk to Africa says, guys, ask yourselves, how come the three of you agree that the CS has to go? What about playing devil's advocate?
At least have one playing the devil's advocate.
I think
the devil can represent himself.
Wait. Hey, mic drop. Also, it doesn't always have to be that, guys. Because sometimes it can be. It almost becomes a performative role. If there's a devil's advocate angle, cool. Yeah. If not, then we speak as is.
If not.
Yeah.
Listen, what we are saying is we have got to fix this nation. We fix this nation, and we've talked about it many times. Fix it by calling for accountability.
Yes.
There is a level of accountability that has been demanded of public officers who have been made to resign. Opiyo Wandayi doesn't know why they resigned, but Felix Koskei, the head of public service, in his statement said the president has accepted the resignation of PS Mohammed Liban. He's also aware of the resignation of Daniel Kipto from EPRA and of Joe Sang at Kenya Pipeline. And immediately those institutions picked people to get into acting capacity.
Yes.
Well, we don't have an acting PS, but obviously the structure of that state department has people who would be able to carry on the job. All right? So accountability has been demanded of these public officers. But above them, where is that accountability? And if we look at what Opiyo Wandayi went and said, let's even begin with the first statements around this uncertainty about fuel supply. And Opiyo Wandayi, the cabinet secretary, would come out and say, well, we have enough supply.
Yeah.
And he ends it at that. All right? And then once these three gentlemen were arrested and were taken to court, the other statement that came in was Opiyo coming to say, we take note of the recent developments. Please read that.
Do I begin with the first one or the second one?
The first one, where he was taking notes.
Okay. The first...
On the 6th of
on the
April.
5th, yes. 5th of April 2026, this is a statement from Opiyo Wandayi saying, we have taken note of recent developments within the petroleum sector, including the resignation by a number of senior officials in the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum and its agencies. Government wishes to assure the public that the situation is under control. When full information about the fuel shipment that is the subject of investigations emerged, we stopped the delivery of a second cargo under similar circumstances, thus protecting and securing public interest. So again, it could have been worse.
We stopped it. As soon as we heard about it.
We further wish to reassure the public that there are sufficient stocks of petroleum to meet current demand. We reiterate the government's commitment to ensuring an uninterrupted supply of quality petroleum products for both Kenya and regional markets. Government's commitment to ensuring uninterrupted supply of what? Quality petroleum products. The G2G fuel procurement framework, which has cushioned Kenyans against immediate shocks arising from the situation in the Gulf, remains stable and resilient. So the ministry has initiated a comprehensive internal review of petroleum products, management systems and processes. This is aimed at reinforcing transparency, safeguarding quality, and ensuring the continued integrity of the supply chain. And it goes on, but the rest is just
The rest is politics.
Reaffirm. There'll be no tolerance for cartels, profiteers, extortionists seeking to exploit the uncertainty arising from the conflicts in the Middle East. Yes. Ndio mjue. Yeah.
So then the following day, or just 2 days later, he again comes in with, statement on the unauthorized importation of super petrol outside the G2G framework, where he comes and says the 60,000 metric tons consignment of super petrol was recently imported into the country in contravention of the procedures set out under the G2G contractual framework. This consignment is priced at 198,000 per metric ton, compared to 140 that is under the G2G arrangement. This could have seen an increase of 58 shillings per 58,000 per metric ton, which would result at an approximate of 14 bob per litre in pump prices. That's why he ordered One Petroleum that imported this said product to withdraw all invoices. They should neither pay the invoices nor profit from the product from this consignment, or One Petroleum directed to exit the product from the market, and so on and so forth. By this time, already, there has been resignation of the said officers, and there's been replacement of the said officers, right? And we are seeing, this is what Opiyo Wandayi is saying. Yesterday, the acting MD of Kenya Pipeline went before the Energy Committee of Senate, and he said, by the way, this is the second time in very many years that we're receiving a consignment that is substandard. The first time was in 2019, when 108,203 tons of fuel on board a vessel was rejected for failing to meet standards. Then, this year, March 27th, the company received the 60,000 tons of fuel aboard MT Paloma. It was tested for compliance with standards and rejected due to high sulfur levels, but it was later allowed into the country following a waiver granted by Trade CS Lee Kinyanjui. This is what Mwendwa said to the Senate committee. He said, we received the consignment on March 27th, but after testing, we realized there were high levels of sulfur. It had a sulfur content of 43 particles per whatever ppm against the requirement of 10 ppm. The company later received instructions allowing the consignment into its system. We received a waiver letter from the Cabinet Secretary for Trade to allow the consignment into the country and into our systems as per his instructions. The fuel was allowed into the KPC system and later released to oil marketing companies pursuant to this waiver. He tabled documents before the Senate committee showing the instructions were contained in a letter from Mr. Lee Kinyanjui on March 28th. The letter directed that the 60,000 tons of substandard petrol be blended with existing stocks to dilute excessive manganese and sulfur levels detected from this consignment. It said, the premium motor spirit, that's PMS, as petrol on board the MT Paloma, be commingled with the current stock to mitigate excess manganese. The letter also directed Kenya Pipeline and the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority to manage the distribution. It says, Kenya Pipeline, working in conjunction with EPRA, control the distribution of the commingled PMS pending the arrival of the next consignments. That's part of the letter.
That's so concerning.
Cabinet Secretary has said, allow this thing to come in, go ahead and commingle, but manage the release of the commingled fuel into the system,
market,
into the market. All right? Kenya Pipeline did that.
Yeah.
These other guys did that. Now, here we are, and we are acting as if the government is claiming it was not aware.
Sasa, have you realized
The Cabinet Secretary did not write to Kenya Pipeline. Cabinet Secretary did not write to EPRA. Cabinet Secretary wrote to his counterpart, cabinet secretary in the Ministry of Energy. All right? I know, umesema tumenyamazia Kinyanjui. Kinyanjui was responding to a request from the ministry. The ministry has requested a waiver, right? I am assuming here that by the time Kinyanjui is responding, he has asked KEBS what can be done. He has asked these guys what can be done. It can be done this way, the other way, the other way. So he writes and says, do it this way. Opiyo Wandayi is on addressed in that letter. Then he says,
I don't know.
I didn't know.
I did not know. That's the point I came to learn that this thing was happening. It was happening behind my back. How?
Mchezo wa town sana. Mchezo wa town sana. I have a lot of... So here's where the other fish could be
Smelling from.
a little bit, yeah? I understand. So this is what... Assuming the best intent, it was, you know what, wamefunga Hormuz, we're expecting delays, we need to plug, a potential shortfall. It's going to be more expensive than what we're used to. It's going to be of a lower standard than what we're used to. We need to, ensure that is done properly, procedurally, Okay, CS, rights to CS. CS, allow, waiver, good, fantastic. Ship, dock, cool. Take fuel, KPC, we're good. And then it all blows up. That's assuming the very best of intent.
Yeah.
The other one is this, and I understand it's a trying time, but the fact that this fuel essentially was still more expensive, at what, I think 58,000.
It was going to be 14 shillings more per liter.
Per liter,
Yeah.
yes, that was what the CS had used in Nimesahau. A price, per metric ton. The difference, this is what the difference is, 58,744 shillings per ton, which goes to about 14 shillings per liter.
Yep.
And of a lower quality. And given that we have 20 days of reserve fuel, at least according to the ministry, could there still be deal making of sorts happening here? This is just thinking out loud. It got here really fast. Really, really fast. Was this tulikwambia, there are those floating vessels, nangoja tu kununuliwa, right? And it makes sense that the floating vessels would have fuel that's over lower quality, that's a bit more expensive, because again, your nikubatisha tu, it's if Tanzania needs, we're good. If Yemen needs, we're good. Kenya. So is there still room for us to think about why this happened so quickly? Why we were so quick to plug the gap with something that was more expensive and of lower quality, especially on the quality bit, because expensive when you're acting out of in a rush. That makes sense. Yeah. People, you'll pay a premium. Again, we are still in a crisis as far as the war in Iran and everything. So that's the other car antenna going up, which is just like, okay, this was way too convenient. Did someone just do some really quick backdoor deal with these floating vessels that are just carrying oil in the ocean, waiting for a phone call?
To just suddenly, it's hard not to consider that as a factor. It's very hard not to. And now, suddenly the panic is, you didn't honor the side of it. Yeah. You were left out.
This was quick math, and now...
Because it doesn't appear as anything else. I don't know whether we've talked a little bit about these risks, have we?
No. The risks of the fuel. No, we haven't.
I think we can do that and then maybe look at what accountability essentially has looked like before in similar scandals, one might say.
Yes.
It's on page 5 of the Daily Nation, but it'll just be really quick highlights because Kaboi Mwangi has done a really good summary. He starts with what's the fuel scandal, which is what we've talked about. What standards a Kenyan motorist supposed to expect? Fuel sold in Kenya is required to meet strict standards. We've talked about that as well. It includes a sulfur limit of 50 parts per million, that's the ppm, and tight restrictions on metallic additives. Fuel that exceeds these limits, meaning it doesn't meet the chemical composition that are required for safe and efficient engine performance, are classified as off-spec. Okay? Talks about how does the sulfur in fuel affect engines, and very briefly it says that excess sulfur interferes with the catalytic converters, which are fitted in modern vehicles to reduce harmful emissions, and that these gradually damage the system and lower its efficiency. Then over time, it leads to higher emissions, reducing the fuel economy, and that the impact is often not immediate, but the engines can run on off-spec for short term, but the damage accumulates. So may not be now, but over time it accumulates. There's risks about the manganese in petrol. Why is adherence to standards so critical in Kenya? In Kenya, where a large proportion of vehicles are used in imports, engines are often more sensitive to fuel quality, making adherence to standards even more critical. And in the local setting, off-spec fuel can have a wider impact, affecting not just individual motorists, but also transport operators and businesses that rely heavily on vehicles. Because you think about that long term,
in short, gari ziko hapa ni second-hand tayari. Yo.
And you're there now trying to just add elements that in the long run. The three other headlines that Kabui has highlighted is, how does Kenya ensure fuel meets required standards? I think we've also gone into that in quite a bit. Talking about checks, it talks about the supply chain with several layers of verification, including pre-shipment inspection, certification at the port of loading, and testing upon arrival before distribution. How does the imported consignment compare with East Africa Community standards? It talks about preliminary tests show that imported fuel had sulfur of 0.0043%, which exceeds EAC's limit of 0.001%. And goes on to talks about manganese, etc. Finally, how did this off-spec fuel get into Kenya? I feel like that's the biggest conversation that we've been having. But it's just good to understand why there's concern. And like we said, Engineer Bath at least was able to, and he kind of said this, he said it may not be immediate, but the long term of having subpar. If you're not intentional about over time phasing it out, is that again, anything subpar will always have long-term effects.
Still make the one. And I think it was really good that we had that conversation yesterday and that we continue to have it so that we are able to be objective and clear without being what's it called? Explosive and alarmist and all of those. But still, like the one is saying, picture this. We have bad fuel already in the market, then it's expensive. Kindly set a date with your mechanic very, very soon. So hopefully that shouldn't be the case. And from what was explained, again, it's a case of blending, and that was even the plan as it was being, as this fuel was being brought in. And I do trust the people at Kenya Pipeline because, again, we have technocrats in this country. They know how to do their job, right? Essentially, so that we don't feel this, the effects of fuel that is substandard. For our environment, now that may be a different idea from an emissions perspective, because the emissions will still be emitted. It's just over time. And it does do something for us as, SDGs, global climate champion, Then
that's another angle.
Only that it's because it's a single consignment of specific amount, 60,000 tons, vis-a-vis how much we consume in a month, for example, which is much more than this. So if it's properly commingled and all, then even basically when you say we are mitigating the effects of the manganese and sulfur, will also be as well as at the emission point in terms of how much also we are emitting. So I believe the technocrats, once they said, the engineer said, well, this is an option that could be used. It's an option that could be used. But it's not the first thing that they should do. It should be a last-ditch effort. I'd like to go back into understanding what was this last-ditch effort of even procuring this oil. And I'm still stuck at that. I do not believe that the government was unaware that, these two companies had been given the contracts to supply. Because by the time they're docking at the coast, everybody is aware, why are you bringing mafuta? Who asked you to bring here? That's a contract coming from government. If by that time it had come from government, if the energy ministry was not aware, it is impossible to say who else would have been aware if the energy ministry is not aware. So what I'm saying is, I do not believe that this procurement of these two vessels that were coming from One Petroleum and from Oryx Energy were coming outside of government knowledge. I do not believe it. They must have been within government knowledge. The point is, if you knew about it, why are you changing your mind now? And why are you doing this dance?
And throwing people under the bus.
And throwing other people under the bus. If you want to push for accountability, which is okay, that if These officers then did something, without authorization, without anything. Let them step aside, let them face the full consequences of taking any action. If they didn't, and you are aware about it, just come out and say, I was aware about it. If you're not aware about it, then also just step aside. Just say, you know what, things are happening in my ministry and I don't know. I'm not in charge here. It's just too much politics here that's going on. And it's affecting what we've been talking about for a long time. These kind of things continue to deepen people's mistrust of the government.
Yep.
They just continue to deepen mistrust. If you just think about it, so many days later, these officers have not been presented to court.
Yeah, I know.
Town.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous political structure.
Yes.
I don't remember the last time there was somebody who actually said, I take responsibility and step aside. A lot of the time, you're cushioned, just asked to be offline for a bit, like don't post. Say less. And then now, come back and you've been given another post. That's our idea of accountability.
Usually an ambassadorial one,
Yes, absolutely. Or another cabinet.
Yes.
Another docket, because maybe water might be easier for you to run.
Oh, God. Brad Bishar is asking, could someone kindly explain anything about Ngamia 1? Ngamia 1 ni talo. Talo oil. Penye walikuwa wamepata mafuta. That's what we were also talking about with Engineer Bath yesterday. Essentially, ni siasa tena. From what, let me be honest, that was my interpretation of what he said. Because the time between this exploration phase and then potentially going to market for tallow was incredibly long, unlike other places where they have been exploring as well. So that tells me that there was just something happening behind the scenes, because you're saying between starting this like exploration process and then going to market in other places where tallow has explored, there it takes 5 to 7 years. Hapa tulikuwa tumegonga year 12 and we're still, doing a little dance. But to answer your question, Brad, so essentially tulikwama mahali, but then now it's been handed over to someone else, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, so Gulf Energy now is the one that is running this, and they presented their technical paperwork. It was being discussed in Parliament. So it's now under that process. Talo wame pull out. It's another entity that's trying their hand in it.
That's it. And we wish them all the best.
Quite genuinely.
Genuinely. Oh, yeah, truly. Because there's nothing else we can wish them.
Yeah. And in all this, the benefits to the country get lost. I go back to that. I go back again to Engineer Bath talking about how industries like this can grow and scale and what that does to economies.
Right.
That is the biggest disservice to Kenyans and to countries that continue to see leadership that does not acknowledge accountability, that believes accountability is a form of weakness when it's actually strength, is what the kind of industries that can be birthed from it, the kind of value add that can come out of it. That is the greatest disservice, is you bungle things like this. Of course, in many ways, it should, and I think it does, not it should, but it does, make investment risky. Investors are just like, it just seems like you all are always caught up in dramatics. Mimi nataka tu ROI.
Yes,
I just want to be able to invest, collaborate. That's what it does. So again, the ripple effect of that is if investor confidence is lowered, then there's just less business circulation. Or it's just tedious. The cost of business, quite literally, not just the monetary cost, the cost when it comes to your reputation, the cost when it comes to your expectations, all of that. That is the bigger disservice when we're looking at this kind of scandal.
True. We'll close the conversation there, but I see you guys are locked in on this conversation on oil. It's a beautiful thing, actually. Who is saying this? An expert can't resign and won't resign. You had already read that one, actually. Yeah. Our CS could be clueless in his But of course, we will have more conversations around mining, oil, and gas, because I think there's a lot happening, and especially when it comes to, you mentioned this yesterday, Jano, community protections and community benefits, right?
Yeah.
If this oil, this gas, this Tanzanite or diamond or gold, I'm in Kholomani and it's in my backyard, how does it benefit me?
Yeah.
Those are conversations we'll be threading. But in the next hour, we'll be speaking to the acting CEO of the Kenyatta National Hospital about, one, the nurses' strike. What happened? How is the return to work formula looking? And is it a bandage or are we actually, healing the wound? And a lot more as far as healthcare is concerned. Shifsha inafanya, KNH, kuna mambo mengi bana. We'll be right back after this with Richard Lesiam.